Welcome to Career Tools. This week, how not to accept a job offer. Chapter 2, don't say yes, but. Here we go. Okay, Wendy, so we covered how to decline an offer a while ago, and then we got questions about how to accept offers. Then we put out a cast about how to accept an offer, and we keep getting questions. And actually, it's kind of good because there are a bunch of subtle situations that occur around offers that are worth exploring in terms of the delicate nature of them, and there's a right way to do it, and you don't want, at that delicate time, to have all the right intentions but not know the right words to say. So a couple of points here, folks. This cast is not about accepting an offer if you have questions regarding the offer. If you have questions, you ask them and get answers before you decide. Accepting an offer is all about how you communicate your previously made decision that you want to accept. This is not about asking questions. You would never say, yes, but I have a few more questions. That's not how things are done. You would ask those questions first. Secondly, this cast is about a very specific situation, which is you've been made an offer and something in your life, in your professional life or personal life, has had a material change such that while you want to accept the offer, you have to, as a professional, make the offering company aware of the change of your circumstances. And the point of that is you wouldn't say yes, but to that. There would be a different way of handling that. And this is a small percentage of situations, but it's nonetheless important because we've seen people get crossways with offering companies and lose offers that they could have kept had they communicated differently. And as I've said before, when it comes to offers and acceptances, we don't like Romeo and Juliets. Those are not good. So, Wendy, what are we going to do?
Okay, so we're just going to cover never say yes, but. Mm-hmm. That's a standard manager tool saying, but here again, it's really important not to say yes, but. If you do have one of those material changes, we're going to use yes and. Mm-hmm. And then at the end, we've got a couple of examples just to give you an idea of those kind of circumstances and what you would say. Yeah,
I think the examples will be helpful for people because I think right now in people's heads, they're thinking, so if I have a question, even after I just said, don't use this for questions. Yeah. But anyway, okay. So don't say yes, but.
Okay, so yes, but as we've said in other casts, introduces conflict in any conversation. Yes. To say yes and then to say but, nobody listens to the yes. They all listen for the what's coming after the but, and you want a positive feeling in this conversation.
Yes, right.
More than any other conversation you have. So to say yes, but is just silly.
Yeah, and as we've said before, but is an acronym. I'm making this up, folks, for behold the underlying truth. And you listen to yourself in meetings, listen to other people talk in meetings. If you hear a tone in their voice that suggests that they've agreed, but they're agreeing in a introductory clause of a sentence, and you could tell by their tonal inflections that there's a comma coming. If after that comma the word however happens, or the word but, however is just really fancy, but you listen to people talk that way, you will literally ignore everything that came before the but. You would say, oh, they're just saying that to make people feel good, and I'm about to hear what they really feel. Imagine then, folks, saying yes, but to an offer. What we hear, what Wendy and I hear, if you say yes, but to an offer we make you, is no.
Yeah.
Because the but cancels out the yes. I mean, we literally throw the yes out and now we're listening. The but says, okay, listen now. Now I'm going to tell you my underlying truth. And that's scary.
Exactly.
And I got to guess that if you say yes, but, it's going to take away from the enthusiasm.
It introduces a condition, right? Mm-hmm. So, yes, I'll accept your offer, but I want more money, but I will only work part-time, but this, but something else. And the hiring manager wants to hear you say, yes, I'm delighted to come to work for you. You're perfect for me. I can't wait to start. And when you say but and there's a condition, they don't feel that.
Right.
And part of that conversation that you're having right now is convincing the hiring manager that he made the right choice in choosing you.
Boy, that's a good one. You know what? We don't say that often enough. It's part of the process. There's risk in making an offer. Right?
Exactly.
And it's not simply the yes, which says, oh, all the risk is gone. The energy, the enthusiasm, the respect that you pay in saying yes, it's very much more analog than it is digital in terms of your ability to influence the goodwill that you're building in the coming weeks and months before you come to work or as you go to work. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's the same reason that you get an email after you've bought a product that says, congratulations on buying this product. Now here's all the things that are great about it. It's to help you feel like you made a good choice. And that's what you're doing for the hiring. That's what you're doing for the hiring manager.
Yeah. And you've told me several times before, dude, you're either declining or you're negotiating.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. If you say yes, but, you are not accepting. Yes is an acceptance. Yes, but is not an acceptance. Like, it's that easy. So if you want to do anything other than accept, if you want to ask a question, if you want to think about it, if you can't make a decision for whatever reason right now, don't start with yes, because yes means I've accepted, and then you ambush the manager with your butt.
Yeah, which says, I really didn't mean what I just said.
Exactly. Yeah. Who does that, right?
So we're suggesting use and rather than but, a classic manager tools, although we certainly didn't invent it, manager tools and career tools recommendation.
Exactly. So if you found out some circumstances that change the way that you're going to change your availability to start, or the way that you're going to be able to work, or that your later availability, so you're going to start but you're not going to be available later on, or whatever, that you think that you know that the hiring manager covered in the interview process and that you agreed to, either specifically or implicitly,
right,
then you need to start with yes. And you want to say yes because you're accepting, and you want to say, and I want to give you this other information, because then you don't do the whole conflict thing.
Right. Well, now, why wouldn't I mean, I think there's some people who would think, if it affects my material availability in some way, if it's fairly significant, I mean, maybe I ought to, once they've offered me, I'm in control. Once I accept, it's legit. Why shouldn't I maybe consider concealing things?
Because you just wipe all the goodwill off the table. And this, if you say yes, and then, I don't know, 3 weeks later you tell them that you're expecting a baby and that you're going to take 6 months maternity leave in the US, where that's not expected, for example, the hiring manager, you're going to have to work for that person for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and you have just destroyed his trust in you, her trust in you. That's why you don't do it. You do it, you give them the opportunity to say, I can't work with that, I'm sorry, right. Up front, before you do that. And you know what? That person is going to love you for that. People don't believe us when we say this, but industries are small enough that you have a reputation, and the reputation for, she accepted the job and then she went off and she never told me, and, nobody is going to trust you anymore. Right. And I know pregnancy is a delicate thing, and you have a right to conceal it and all of that kind of stuff. But you need to think about it from a goodwill point of view and a reputation point of view, as well as a personal point of view.
Yeah. Now, there are some things, folks, that you ought to be asking questions about in advance, if in fact they're of interest to you on the company side. These are things, what we're talking about here are things that happen on your side of the equation. Now, you don't have to, as in the example of a pregnancy, which is a tough one, because there are there are rules about these things. You could easily choose to conceal that. But if you conceal it, as Wendy says, and you go to work there, they will allow you to take full advantage of your rights. But your rights will not protect you when, as Wendy says, you've destroyed your goodwill.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So, would you say that you need to bring up everything, or is there, what kind of guidance can we give about what would cause a yes and as opposed to just a straight yes?
Anything that would prevent you accepting the offer as it's made. So not being able to work, or not being willing to work. No, probably not being able to. Willing is different. Not being able to work the hours that have been discussed. Not being able to work at the start date that's been discussed.
And to be clear, all those things are, you would bring that up in a yes and because your situation has changed.
Yes.
It's very unusual that the offer would be made so much different than what you were interviewing for. And if you were interviewing, you had a question about the hours, you would ask, right? You would ask in advance about the hours if, in fact, there was a problem with your ability to work those hours. Okay, good.
Not being able to work the location that's been discussed, or not being able to do the travel that's being discussed. So things like that because of childcare, because of... they tend to be family circumstances. We're not talking about, I'll accept the offer as long as you give me more money. They're not things like things that you want to change because they don't suit you. We're talking about things that...
Right, it's not a matter of desire. It's a matter of material ability.
Exactly.
Right? Can you, in fact, do the job? Or if the offer has not changed, but your situation has changed in some way, that's what we're talking about here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And one more, if you've just found out that the project that you're on is going to take an extra couple of weeks, but your professionalism, your own professionalism demands that you finish that out those couple of weeks. Most hiring managers will probably give you a couple of weeks. And we're not talking about staying on the project for another 6 months.
Yeah, well,
but if it's a couple of weeks.
You say not 6 months. So let's talk about that, because we get this question all the time in the field. I told my boss I'm leaving, and he said, I should have told you, but the project is going to be extended 6 months, and we really just can't have you leave right now. And there are two things going on there, guys. One, the manager is not being truthful. He's using the project and your professionalism against you. And the second thing is, well, you actually can leave. I suppose unless you signed a contract that was based on the length of the project. But folks, if it's 6 months, that is, if you're interviewing with the idea that you can leave in a couple of weeks because the project is done, and now your boss says it's 3 months or 4 months or 5 months or 6 months, you're not obligated to stay. Unless there's a contract. Whereas 2 weeks is a matter, I think what you're saying, Wendy, and correct me if I'm wrong, that what you're saying is professionalism. If you believed that it would be okay for you to leave, say, at the end of March, and then your boss says, hey, listen, we've had a little glitch, and it's going to be, actually, this thing is we're going to be done April 11th or April 21st, then you would say, well, obviously, there are steps I have to take toward the end of the project. This is a yes and situation for 2 or 3 weeks.
Or if somebody's coming in and you want to, and the person coming in isn't coming in for another week, but you want to do a handover, you feel obliged to do a proper handover, another week so that you can do the handover is probably acceptable.
Yeah. Okay. Now, we're hoping that the hiring manager is understanding.
Yeah, we are. And in my experience, most hiring managers, once they've got to this point, they are convinced that you're the right person for them. They feel good about you. You're helping them feel good about you by choosing your words carefully and having good reasons for making changes to the offer. But not every hiring manager will. And I'd love to have the magic words to make every hiring manager do the right thing, the professional thing, to understand that a week or 2 weeks or an hour a week or whatever in a long-term relationship is nothing. But that's not always the case. And it's absolutely possible that they will say, I can't work with that, and rescind the offer.
Yeah. And there are good reasons, right? If it was a sickness, it was a family issue, if it's you being a professional at your current company, all those are good reasons for them to be respectful, to actually appreciate the candor rather than dumping it on them once you're there and making it almost a bait and switch situation. But you're right. There is a possibility that an offer will get rescinded. And this is both the upside and downside of being an ethical professional. Is you can choose to conceal, but the ramifications of concealment in a situation like this are, one, your ethics, and two, your relationship with your boss going forward. And as we like to say, choose the harder right instead of the easier wrong. And this is the harder right, and this is the way to action it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think you've said once to me, there aren't words that'll fix stupid people. And frankly, I think if you need 2 more weeks in your existing job, or you need, if you said, I have to leave early every day at 3:30 for the next 3 months because of my spouse's situation, or I have a child in a difficult situation, or I have an elderly person or something like that, the manager who would say, no, I can't work with that, I'd say, stupid. There's all kinds of accommodations you can make around work. It makes things harder, but we oughtn't be offering people who aren't willing to overcome something that makes things a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, I'd almost say if the hiring manager rescinds the offer based on one of your family, you just had a narrow escape from somebody who isn't a great manager.
There's nothing so exhilarating as being shot at and missed.
Exactly.
Yeah, good. All right, so let's give them some examples.
Okay, so we've got three examples. So starting with one that's a medical issue. So for example, you might say, thank you so much for the offer. I'd be delighted to accept. And I've just found out that my mother is sick and I have to go to Ohio for a couple of weeks to take care of her. I can understand if that makes a difference to your offer, but I'd be happy if we can work out a start date that will work for both of us.
Yeah. I would say the one thing I might change about that is, and maybe this is British versus American, I'd be delighted to accept is not actually an acceptance. That's like people say, it's like when I land on a plane and they say, we'd like to be the first to welcome you. Well, you are. Yeah, you actually are. Well, just welcome us. Don't be the person. Don't tell us what you'd like. Actually welcome us. So I would say I'm delighted to accept. That's a slight difference.
See, I think of it as I would be delighted to accept, except that I have information that you don't have, and therefore I can't until you know this information. So maybe that is a British thing, the way I think about it.
Yeah, I think in this case we're saying yes, and the I'd be delighted to accept in America is I'm not accepting. On the other hand, I think it's materially interesting because I am accepting, and yet I understand that you could rescind the offer. Yeah. So, yeah. Okay, let's do the next one.
Exactly.
What's the next one about?
So this one is an expectant mother. So thank you so much for the offer. I'm delighted to accept, and I've just found out that I'm expecting another child. I'm due in August, which will give me 6 months to get up to speed, and then I intend to take a month's maternity leave. I'm certain that I can minimise the disruption that this will cause.
Yeah, I think that's good.
And so you give the hiring manager the opportunity to say, oh, that actually August is like when stuff is going to hit and it's our busiest month and I don't know that we can cover that. Or you give them the opportunity to say, August is our busiest month and I've got 6 months to prepare for it. Thank you for telling me.
Right.
So that's a good thing. And then the final one is a professionalism one. So thank you so much for the offer. I'm delighted to accept. And the project that I'm on here will complete in 1 month. I hope that you will be able to accommodate a start date of the 7th of March.
Yeah, good.
So most people expect you in the US, I think, to give 2 weeks notice. So if you want a month, you have to say something that tells them you're not gonna be there in 2 weeks, because they have that expectation.
Yeah, and there are people who would say, accept the offer, and a couple of days later call and say. Now, look, guys, if you know at the moment you're accepting the offer that the start date has changed, then we recommend ethically, professionally, you have to say something at the time. If you know at the time you're accepting, you have to use the yes and. Because, again, you're starting the relationship, and the company is going to start all kinds of work. And if the start date, there are cases where you have to start with a new class, an incoming class of trainees or interns or whatever. And if you don't do that, if you miss that start, it may be another 2 months before they do another class. And you have to say that at the time. Otherwise, the kind of work that is going to get done is going to make their lives much more difficult. And that's just the way a lot of large companies are.
Yeah, I used to work somewhere where everybody had to start on a Monday. It didn't matter. So if you missed that Monday, you had to go to the next Monday because the people that helped you start weren't there any other day of the week.
Yeah, good. Okay, so we don't ever say yes, but if we need to make a change because there's something material on our end, we say yes and then we gave them some examples. Any final thoughts?
I think accepting offers is easy in general. You say yes, I'm delighted, or no, I'm sorry to decline. And the complications that we tangle ourselves up in normally are caused by wanting something different than we have. Now you've been offered something, and if you know that there's something materially changed in your circumstances, you have to tell the hiring manager at that point. The goodwill that you wipe off the table by not doing so is just not worth it for the relationship you're going to have for the next 4 years.
Yep. Good. Okay. Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. That's another great week with Career Tools. Come back next week. See you then.